It's 6 o'clock. Josh Holmes-Bright. Welcome back to Caroline Community Radio. You're now joined by me, Josh Holmes-Bright. I'm with you until 8 o'clock tonight. And I'm joined by a very special guest. It's a man who sung with a pre-Queen band you may know called Smile. He later became a model maker, designer and animator. Worked on shows like Thomas the Tank Engine and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in more recent years, he's stepped back into the musical world. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Tim Staffell. Good evening, Tim.
Hello. Hi, Josh.
How are you doing?
Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You doing well?
Yes, I'm good. I'm very well, actually.
Good, yeah. Good. I'm glad to hear. Now, we met a couple of months back. I'm not sure if you remember. You were doing a show in London, and you were doing a bit of a concert, and then showing the film as well. So that was a few months ago, and then we've sorted this out. So it's very exciting to have you on. So I can only thank you enough for coming on.
Thanks. That was at the Exchange at Twickenham, was it? That was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a nice evening. I enjoyed that.
It was nice, yeah. It was good. I like smaller, more intimate venues like that, so it's nice to get out and do something different. But
well, I kind of like working with the duo, these days. It allows you for a bit of interplay, but the logistics of putting something on the road are they're not like a band where you've got to get 4 or 5 people together and sort the transport out and sort all the gear out and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, a duo is a manageable entity, and I enjoy that.
That's good. We are going to get on to what you're doing at the moment in more recent times later on in the interview. I think it makes sense if we start towards the beginning of the career. We'll go forward in time. So, I mean, many musicians are influenced by other artists from quite an early age. Was this the case for you? Did you have those sort of inspirations while you were growing up?
I hope this isn't going to sound. I hope this isn't going to sound arrogant, and it's not meant to, because I don't think I've ever really been influenced by any musicians. And and the reason I say that is because I'm by nature lazy.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, I often read a guitar player saying, "Oh yeah, well, I copied faithfully. I copied all of his licks, and I copied loads of his solos and that." Well, I was too lazy to copy anybody. I didn't have the patience. And so whatever I am these days, it's as original as I can make it, Okay. I mean, I've been at it long enough so that it seems to have a life of its own. If I'd given up, people would have looked at and listened to what I'd done mostly, I think, and said, "Oh yeah, well, that was they would know I'd been lazy, But I think, and I don't think that's such a bad thing, because it means that you can forge your own path, and you can come out of it with just a slightly different approach to things. And I think my material and my songs are unusual, and not derivative.
Absolutely.
So apart from the fact that I enjoyed certain people, I mean, I was prompted in the very, very early days by listening to people like Lonnie Donegan.
Oh, right, okay.
And then Elvis. We're talking the 60s now, early 60s, late 50s even.
Right, yeah.
But I didn't really get into any kind of serious influences at all.
Okay.
I don't think. God, I hope that doesn't sound arrogant.
Not at all. Absolutely not. Were your parents big into music as well? Was this something they'd sort of introduced you to at all? No, not at all. My father, I'll tell you what, I'm a bit of a chatterbox. I've got to warn you, I'm a real chatterbox. Right.
And I start going into tangents. My father was the sort of guy who used to potter about. He used to try and have a go at everything. And he played a sort of keyboard, but by ear and not particularly well.
Right. Okay.
And to a certain extent, I think I inherited that tendency to just want to have a go at things without really engaging with them. And so insofar as there was a fundamental an influence whereby he made me a curious person.
Okay.
in terms of technicality and music and application, no, not at all.
Right, okay, fair enough. Was he into the same sort of stuff you were if you listened to music, like you mentioned Lonnie Donegan and Elvis, or...?
My dad's music taste and mine were at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right, okay.
He used to enjoy people like James Last, who, if you know James Last, the James Last Orchestra was a German big band in the 60s that played very bland, insipid versions of pop songs.
Okay.
They just had no groove at all, no vibe whatsoever. But mums and dads loved them.
Of course, yeah.
The other thing my dad liked was cinema organ.
Okay,
and,
right.
Which I kind of, I used to be cynical about at the time, but subsequently I've realised that, it is a genre that is worth listening to because it's so special that, that it can't be without skill and talent.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so, but I, he didn't like me playing guitar. And he used to say, "You don't play guitar, you just strum."
Right.
And I used to say, "Well, that is playing guitar."
Well, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Was this?
He didn't take me seriously.
Fair enough. No, fair enough. Was this, your dad saying that sort of stuff and you wanting to play guitar? Was this something that made you want to go into music professionally? This sort of rebellious stage, if you like.
I don't think there was a direct connection, but from an early age, I just wanted to be a singer. I can remember saying to my mother, "Mum, I want to be a singer," and she was much more respectful of what I said I wanted to do than my dad was. My dad was critical. My mum was supportive, but I think that deep down she tended to think, "Well, he'll get over it,"
Sure.
But she, to my face, she was supportive and encouraging.
Well, that's good. That's good. You need someone like that.
Yeah, well, what happens, of course, is that as soon as you get into a peer group that enjoys the same things, that's where the true motivation comes from. Because you want to establish yourself as an active member of that peer group, and you want the respect of your peers. I mean, that's. I think it's more. It comes more from that than it does from parental influence, either whether it's negative influence or positive. Yeah, I think it's mostly about peer group.
You talk about peers there. I mean, very early on, you were surrounded by people who'd later become some very big names. I mean, first of all, Brian May in particular.
Yeah. Sure.
How did you form the band? Within 1984, it was called at first, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, there were two school bands at Hampton where I got a scholarship to Hampton. Okay. Hampton was at Hampton Grammar at the time. It was. I got a scholarship there, which my mum and dad were proud of because Hampton was a good school. Brian was there. There were a few other people there that were impressed by the music scene at the time, the growing music scene in London.
Yeah.
There ended up being two main school bands. One was 1984, and the other one was the Others.
Right.
The singer of the Others was Paul Stewart, who I'm working with now.
Yeah. Oh, wow, yeah.
Who, when you saw us at the Exchange, Paul Stewart was the singer with the Others at Hampton School when I was there. I know, it's bizarre.
That's insane.
I know, it's a wonderful circle that's come round again. I really like it. But I met Brian quite by chance. I was playing harp, I think, at a gig that him and Dave Dillaway were playing at, and I don't recall the precise circumstances, but it just seemed like a good idea that I'd join the band. So I joined their little outfit, played harmonica, sang, and the band, which had been called something else, I'm not quite sure what, became 1984, and then we started doing gigs.
Right, okay.
To supplant our pocket money. And in fact, the Others were our heroes because they were actually further ahead than we were at Hampton.
Oh wow!
They got many more gigs than us, and they were much cooler looking.
Right.
And I think they looked very much like the Stones at the time. They modelled themselves on the Stones. We didn't really model ourselves on anybody, and we were more of a covers band, whereas they tended to cover really sort of mainstream blues.
Oh, right. Okay.
Whereas we used to do pop and all sorts of things,
Okay, so was that like what was big at the time? So late 60s or something with this been? So
mid 60s, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. And you later went on to recruit, of course, Roger Taylor as well. That was after. What happened was when we all left Hampton School to go on to tertiary education, I left and went to Ealing College. Brian left and went to Imperial College in London. I was at Ealing Art School. Dave Dillaway, who was the bass player in 1984, went up north somewhere to an electrical college. The rhythm guitarist went somewhere else. The drummer went somewhere else. So it was just the natural evolution of our education meant that that 1984 split up. Yeah.
But Brian and I had been closer friends, and so we agreed that we would still continue to play music. And by this time, we'd written a couple of tunes.
Right.
So we advertised for Roger. We didn't.
Yeah, looking for Roger Taylor. Yeah.
We advertised for a drummer on Imperial College's student notice board. I think that's what it was. And Roger applied, and he came down to a flat in, I think it was Addison Gardens in Shepherd's Bush, and we had an impromptu jam, and it was clear that he was exactly the guy that we wanted. We wanted to be like a power trio,
So you knew in that moment, you knew that Roger Taylor was the right fit for the band.
Pretty much. He was so good. I mean, he was so good, flamboyant, dynamic, and exactly the kind of guy we were looking for. I don't think we could have gone back to we could have used the drummer from 1984, but he wasn't the right kind of drummer.
Right. Okay.
Because he wasn't at college. He was the one member in 1984 who was working, and he was local, so we could have gone back to him. But he wasn't the right kind of drummer. Roger was flamboyant. Roger had Keith Moon flourishes and all sorts of things that were exactly what we wanted, and so we knew straight away. Yeah.
Right. Oh, it's always good when you've got that reassurance, I suppose.
Yeah.
And had you tried anyone else out before Roger, or was this?
No, we hadn't. I don't think we did. Brian might say, yeah, we did. Don't remember that guy, but I don't recall. And I don't think we did. I think Roger was the first guy to come down.
Fair enough. And between Brian and Roger, who would later go on to become two of the biggest names in music, did you sense that connection at the time? Could you tell that at some point one of you would go on to be big stars?
That's weird. That's a funny question, really, because I tend to think at that age we were all of us were a little self-obsessed,
right?
In the sense that we all knew we wanted to do something, but we didn't know in what format it would be. We didn't know whether it would be with the current band or in a different situation. I mean, and as it happened, I obviously decided that it wasn't going to be with the current band, so I legged it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure that Roger and Brian were that mutually compatible at that point, because they both obviously individually wanted to get on in music, but they had no idea that Queen would become what it was, because Freddie joined when I left.
Yes.
And they were rehearsing it up, and don't forget, for a long time they didn't have any success. As far as I'm aware, it took them 3 albums to start making money. I mean, so I guess there was a certain feelings of insecurity all through that period.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think that's what it comes down to. If you feel really secure with the people that you're working with, then the outfit that you're working with has got better chance.
Sure.
If you have personal insecurity, you know, it can fall apart at any time, I guess. I mean,
of course.
I mean, I never really felt any security. I didn't feel any security in music until much later on in life.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's why I packed it in, you know, at the time. And then part of that and the fact that I wasn't earning any money. But I suppose I was a bit self-obsessed, and I decided to move on and see if I could try my hand with a different outfit with different.
Radio for the Malden District on the Essex Coast on 94.7 online and smart speaker. You're listening to Caroline Community Radio.
Visions of Whittam is an independent, local family opticians for all ages and budgets, offering a caring, personalised service. With over 50 years professional optical experience, we love to look after your eye care needs. So come and see us at Visions of Whittam, 94 Newland Street. We're right on the High Street with free parking. Phone 01376 515 510 or visit visionsofwhittam.co.uk. Book an eye test now and quote radio to get 10% off frames, including our designer frames.
Looking for something to do or somewhere to go? Well, at whatgoon.com you can find a huge range of events. Whatgoon.com is an online events and entertainment website providing information on a whole range of things to do and places to go. If you have an event you would like to add, then why not give it a go? It's free and really easy. Whatgoon.com. Whatever it is you want to do, wherever it is you want to go, enjoy discovering it with us.
94.7 for Malden and the Essex Coast.
On 94.7 online and smart speaker.
Caroline Community Radio.
Well, you knew Freddie, first of all. Am I right in thinking you knew Freddie?
Yes, we were mates at Ealing College long before
right.
I left. He had a band. He had a couple of bands he played with. I went to see his bands a couple of times. He came to see Smile a few times. I mean, the scene in the film where he comes downstairs and we're playing, it's not that far from the truth.
Right.
Well, it's not far from the truth at all. But what is not correct is that he goes up to the band after the gig and says, because I announced that I was going to leave. And they condensed that into a bit of filmic.
Of course, yeah.
Thing, yeah. Which is, but it doesn't matter. The emotional integrity is maintained, and so I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, of course. What was Freddie like? Was he the sort of character everyone knew from, the Big Queen days through the 80s? Was he a bit more, I don't know, was he different? Was he putting on a mask maybe?
He was much more subdued. I mean, it's like anybody really. It takes a while for your confidence to build. You've got to be out in the world testing your confidence on people before you see whether it works or not.
Yeah.
I think Freddie at college was becoming aware that he was developing this kind of confident approach, this confident facade. I mean, I don't mean to call it a facade in the sense that it was somehow false. It wasn't. It was his shop window. He was developing his own shop window, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And later on in the 70s, people were responding to it, and people were realising that he was a character.
Yeah.
And he had a lot to say, and he was a really talented songwriter and a really good singer. And plus the fact that he had this wonderful attitude, and of course he was camping things up as well, and people like that. People like that because he was entertaining everybody he met, and people enjoy that,
Yeah, absolutely.
But college is less so, more reserved.
Right, okay, yeah. You did leave Smile and you joined a band, which has now become quite a well-known scene from the film, from the emphasis on the name. But you joined a band called Humpy Bong. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
What was the decision in that? I mean, you briefly touched on it, just wanting to move forward and move on.
Yeah, I went for a lot of interviews. I went for a lot of auditions.
Sure,
Some of them I can't recall. I mean, there are things that I've never spoken about. I mean, I went for an audition. I auditioned for a band called The Footprints. I got that. I didn't want to do it. They were you got to feel secure. It's again but the Footprints were a superb band. They were like the Hollies.
All right.
We rehearsed a song. I can even remember it. I'm not going to sing it, but I can remember the lyrics of the song. Then I briefly joined a band called March Hare, which was managed by Dave Davis of the Kinks.
Oh wow!
In fact, I'm still in contact with the guitarist from March Hare, but that didn't last very long. I didn't feel comfortable with that.
No.
And then eventually I met Jonathan Kelly, and I auditioned for Humpy Bong. Now, when I auditioned for it, it wasn't called Humpy Bong. It was just a band. And Jonathan Kelly, who was an absolutely superb singer-songwriter, was such an impressive figure himself that I thought, this is a guy I want to work with, you know.
Yeah.
And his manager was Colin Peterson, who was the drummer from the Bee Gees. The original drummer from the Bee Gees.
Wow.
And the reason he called the band Humpy Bong is because Humpy Bong was one of the first places in the discovery of Australia. It's a town.
Oh, right, okay.
On the east coast of Australia. And I think Colin Peterson used to live near there, and he decided to call the band Humpy Bong. Great, wonderful choice, Colin.
Yeah. I mean, people remember it, don't they? People remember it, so...
I know. I often have this conversation with Paul about band names. I think, God, that's a terrible band name. And he says, yeah, but all that's got to happen is it's got to get into people's memories, and then the context of the name will disappear, and it will just become the label for that act. And
Absolutely.
he's quite right, you know. And I think that's probably what would have happened with Humpy Bong if it had been successful. But clearly it wasn't, you know.
And you did eventually stop doing music. Was Humpy Bong? Yes, sorry. Was Humpy Bong your last band that you were involved in?
No, Jonathan Kelly, who was the main writer for Humpy Bong, went on and got himself his own band. And I joined Morgan. I joined Morgan Fisher from the Love Affair and Maurice Bacon from the old Love Affair, and in the band called Morgan. And we did 2 albums in Italy and toured Italy, which was those 2 albums are really good. I'm very proud of those albums. It was like prog rock, and they've become sort of cult albums now.
Right.
But that lasted 2 or 3 years. It got paid a pittance, but was surviving. And after that, I joined Jonathan Kelly's band, which was called Jonathan Kelly's Outside. And to this day, I kind of think that Jonathan Kelly's band was the best band I've worked with. Because, well, the original guitarist was Chaz Jankel from Ian Jury and the Blockheads.
Yeah.
The second guitarist was Snowy White.
Oh, wow.
The bass player and the drummer were just killer. They were such a good rhythm section. And of course, Jonathan wrote some wonderful songs. And we had a conga player, and we had horns. To be honest, it was a bit of a funk band, and it's one of the reasons why I actually got very heavily into jazz fusion in the mid '70s because of that. But it was after that I pulled the plug on it, because I wasn't really earning enough to keep myself and my wife, so I had to get a job.
Right, fair. That's the only reason, is it? Just the money, basically.
It was economics purely, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And I did feel it was quite traumatic to actually realise that I was having to give up on a dream basically. But you get over these things, and you move on. And of course, what I never really did was I never really gave up on music. It's just it went on to the back burner, and I was still playing with different people and still working in scratch bands and still writing songs and making little demos and things. So, but my main occupation then became model making and filmmaking. And
was this the whole model making and animation? Was this something you'd picked up from art school, art college? Was that a passion you had from there?
Well, in fact, I tell a lie. The first job I had when I packed up music was I did graphic design at college, and I was always a reasonable illustrator. So the first job I had when I left music was I used to paint these enormous cartoons for bookmakers' windows, like sports characters and things to put in bookmakers' windows, and did that for about a year. And then I got a job as a technician at an art college, just doing not actually doing anything artistic, but just helping the students. Being a print technician, stretching canvas, pottery, photography, just generally getting to grips with the mechanics of art disciplines. And actually that was really good for me, because it meant that I had a booster course in what I'd done at art college. But had been, because I was playing music at art college, I spent my grant on a bass guitar and an amplifier. And although I got my diploma, I was really focusing on music all the time. But later on, when I'd packed it in and I got this job as a technician, it really helped me to focus again on those disciplines. And from there, someone phoned me up and said, "Do you think you could do a sculpture, of a life-size sculpture of a bloke drinking beer?"
As you do.
If there's one thing I've learned to do in life, if someone asks you if you can do something, just say yes. Just say yes, and then worry about it afterwards. Panic. Say yes and then panic.
Right.
Which is exactly what I did. And so I went to the studio and I did a sculpture. It was for a commercial. And I did a full-size sculpture in wax, plastiline. And it was good enough. And they paid me for it. And from that day on, I stayed working in that workshop. And jobs would come in the door. I was still freelance, but working for one guy, in one situation. I just kept getting job after job after job.
That's always good, isn't it, to have the work flowing in? You can't complain with that.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you know this story, but one day a guy came into the workshop, a client came into the workshop. I didn't know who he was, and he said he wanted an album cover. He wanted this sculpture of an alien for an album cover. And I said, yeah, and he gave me some reference of the alien. So I said, yeah, I'll do that for you. So over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I sculpted this alien. It had lights in the eyes, painted it, made it in fiberglass, painted it, presented it, and it was taken away, and I got paid, and everything, all was good. And then about 10 years later, I was round Roger Taylor's house at a firework party. Right. And on the mantelpiece of his house was this alien that I'd made. And I said, "What the hell are you doing with that?" And he said, "That was the alien on the cover of my album."
Oh, my gosh.
And I said, "You what?" And, I didn't know that from that moment until then, that the alien was for Roger Taylor's Fun in Space album.
That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
I know. I went to Japan a couple of years ago to do some public personal appearances. And the Japs knew all about that story. And they freaked out about it. They totally freaked out about it. I mean, one of them, I don't know if you can see this. I wonder, one of the Japanese girls embroidered a baseball cap for me with with the alien on it.
That's fantastic.
I know.
That's just incredible.
I know it is. I know.
So, how many years after working with Roger in Smile would this have been?
Oh, jeez. It was released in 1981. That would have meant that I did the Alien about 1980. So, if you consider that I left Smile in late 69, call it 70, it's a decade. Yeah, it's exactly a decade.
Right. Okay. That's brilliant.
I know.
A decade later, you'd unintentionally done the model for his album cover. Just incredible. I mean, you went on to work with Roger and Brian again later with the film Bohemian Rhapsody. How, basically, that's the question. Like, how did that come about? Because you'd worked on some of the songs, the remastered versions. Well, briefly, I had one more occasion of working with them in 1992. Oh, right, okay. I don't know if you know this story, is that in 1992, and obviously 1992 was the year after Freddie passed. Yeah. And Roger has always had another band called The Cross. Yes, yeah. And The Cross had a Christmas party at the Marquee Club when it was in Shaftesbury Avenue, and they invited me along to sing a couple of songs. Oh, right, okay. So there's a YouTube on video. There's a video on YouTube. Yeah, that's the one. Which is not very good quality, but I went up and worked with them again. We recreated Smile just for a couple of tunes on over 2 nights. And that was quite amazing. Yeah. But then the movie, the Bo Rap, Brian phoned me up. It must have been about March of 2018, and he said, we're doing the movie, and I said, yeah. And we were talking about it, and I thought at that time I'd read what everyone else had read in the tabloids and everything. I thought at that time that that Sacha Baron Cohen was playing Freddie. And I remember thinking to myself, how's that going to work? I can't see that working at all. And then I heard that there'd been, serious arguments on set, and that he wasn't doing it anymore. And then I found out that Rami Malek was playing the part, and I thought, wow, now that's interesting. And Brian phoned me up and said, look, when we're showing a portion of Smile in the beginning. And depicting Freddie joining the band, he said, but what we're finding is that we're not making the actual music isn't coming out the way we want it. He said that, so I was going to ask you if you fancy coming down and having a crack at singing it. Right. Okay. So I thought, well, all right, my 70-year-old self is going to have a go at recreating my 20-year-old self. Yeah, So I said, yeah, and of course, what was I going to say? No. I mean, I said, yes, of course I will. And when I got down there, and I think and I also played bass on it as well. And what think happened was, it wasn't that what they were getting from Jack Roth wasn't acceptable. It's just that it needed to have that 70s vibe to it. Yeah. And in fact, if anything, I think my bass playing was probably more important than my singing. Because it needed to be a bit more visceral, because it needed to be less sophisticated. And of course, there's nothing that Queen have been if it hasn't been sophisticated. Yeah. And so I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to make a slightly rough-edged bit of rock with their sophisticated hats on, and it wasn't really working. So they got me in, and so I roughed it up for Oh, right.
To be honest with you, that whole track is a hybrid anyway. It's bits and pieces of every version.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, wow.
It's a largely. I suppose I should say that. I mean, I don't suppose anybody really cares, but the whole thing is largely a digital construct with me singing over it. I mean, but they used Roger singing over it and Brian singing, and even some. I think there's even some of Freddie's vocal on there from their version of it. But it was a hybrid construction, But
That's
it was
amazing.
still fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Now, before we get kicked off the call, because, time limits and that, you've got a new solo album coming out, and I've not ignored any of your solo stuff. You're going to be back with us in a few months, I believe. We're going to talk all about it then. But, when can we expect this new album out, and what can we expect as quick as you can before you get kicked off?
I think it's called Wayward Child.
You think that's good? That's good.
Yes, I know. We'll talk about that. For the first time, I'm singing softer and gentler than I ever was before because the studio encouraged me to do so. I'm really pleased with it. It's a mix of songs, some soul-y, some bluesy, some probably sheer pop. We're going to release singles, and then the album will come out as a whole. But I think it's going to be spring of 2023 before we start dropping singles.
Brilliant. Well, I'm already looking forward to it. Tim, I'll see you in a few months' time. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Josh. I hope I wasn't just blithering.
No, it was all right. No, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.